Amorim is set to take the reins at Manchester United, but how could it look? And we're going to, in today's video, have a little look at Amorim's tactics at Sporting, something I've covered in the past before, so I will link back to another video that I've done in the past of Amorim Sporting, and how it could look in the sort of grand scheme of things at Manchester United. If you do want a few extra explanations going through the video, a lot of these sort of examples are from this video, so do go and check this video out straight after you've watched this one. Here are two of Amorim's Sporting teams. On the left, you have one from last season. On the right, you have one from this season. As you can see, he sets up in this 3-4-3 system with the three across the back, the double pivot, the two wing backs, and then what you basically have is two inside forwards alongside the striker, which is Victor Gyökeres. We could definitely see quite a few United players in new roles under Amorim, with some wingers turned wing backs, some wingers / attacking midfielders in those inside forward roles, and even a few interesting centre-back selections. Here is a vague idea of that sustained shape on the ball with the three centre-backs at the base, the two pivot in the middle, the triangle of three with the striker and the two inside forwards, and then the wing-backs really high and wide, pinning the opposition full-backs back. Amorim's side have an emphasis from playing out from the back, trying to bypass that narrow midfield pivot, trying to play between the lines into those inside forwards or even directly into the wing-backs who are running in behind or holding the width. Whilst this double pivot can still be an access point during the build-up phase, it is important that the centre-backs of Manchester United or the centre-backs of Sporting when playing for Amorim are able to bypass that middle line so that they can attract the pressure in the middle of the pitch, bypass into those inside forwards, which you can see in between the lines, to then allow them to attack directly with a front five, including the wing-backs. In terms of the out-of-possession system, you've got the three through the middle and again the two pivot. The idea here is to shut off all central angles and to cut them off and force them to go down the outside. When you force them down the outside, that is when the wing-back can then apply that pressure and all of the other players, including the pivot, can converge to that side of the pitch to trap the team against the sideline. This is where one of the back three have to jump out, and usually it was the central centre-back for Sporting, but it could be any of the three, and he could tweak that part of the system to suit Manchester United's full centre-backs, especially with Leny Yoro. One of those central defenders jumping out to basically become that number 6 behind the two pivot who have pushed over to one side of the pitch or backed up the press further forward, allows them to step up into the number 6 whilst the other two centre-backs cover the space behind them, with the two full-backs dropping in to still create that 4 at the back with 1 in front, just a different way of forming it. And lastly, you can see when they want to be compact and sit back with that 5 at the back, the 3 or the 2 in the middle, and then 3 again trying to stop that central progression, they can be nice and compact and stop teams breaking through them with that mid-block. But how will Amorim set up this Manchester United side with the players that he has at his disposal, and who could he even look at in the transfer market, and how could that affect how he goes into the season, not only this season but next season with this United squad? So how could Amorim set up at Manchester United? We've got the 3-4-3 up on screen here with the two narrow attacking midfielders, the striker, the double pivot, which we've already touched on, the 3 at the back, and the two wing-backs, very important for Amorim and his system. But how could the current personnel of Manchester United fit into this? And on screen now is pretty much the team that I think you would maybe see to begin with. I think a lot of the components of this team match up with what Amorim would want to do with this Manchester United. Højlund, many have pointed out, is very much like Gyökeres in the terms of being direct, being willing to run into the channels, being a good athlete in that sense. I think he's got the striking mechanics to, again, be that goal scorer and that focal point in the team. I do also think Xerxes is another option that you could see in games which it's a little bit less direct, but for him to drop into these pockets more so with Fernandes, and then you'd actually instead see somebody like Rashford making those runs into that sort of area. But it would depend on the personnel behind if it was to be Xerxes, which is why Højlund maybe gets the nod to begin with, as he is a more direct option sort of on his own. So I think that front three could be very sort of interchangeable. I've touched on it a few times on Twitter when I've been speaking about it. I think Bruno in this role, it could be on either side. I think, again, it depends on who's going to sort of play in this one as well. But Fernandes can play as that Goncalves, that playmaker, the one who can drop in, and he can play as one of these number 10s to receive between the lines, but he can also come wide to sort of play make, He can be in and around the box to be the last man on the end of things. And very much like Goncalves, I think he will play in one of those free roles. And then that sort of allows you to have this secondary role up there with him change based on the side that Fernandes is playing. So this could be Rashford. As I said, I think, and we're going to get into the wing backs in a minute, I think Rashford could be very important to begin with, with Amorim's team, right? Because I think with Amorim, as we sort of touched on in the philosophy part of the video, he likes to go vertical at certain points in the game. And these wing backs, they have to be high and wide to pin defenders. But both of these, Mazraoui and Dalot, the two that I sort of have like earmarked for that first role as a wing back, they don't quite offer that stretch and pin quality that the others do, or that other wing backs of Amorim have in the past. Which is why I think someone like Rashford could be important in terms of offering that direct route to goal and making those runs in behind, which could see him favoured until United get one of those stretch and pin wing backs, having the need for a Rashford in the team for verticality reasons. However, if Rashford isn't playing and it's Fernandes on that left side, which is something that's where Goncalves used to play for, I also think Ahmad would be brilliant in this role. Really, really good in this sort of inside forward role, very much like a Trincao or Marcus Edwards last year. He can come out wide, he can facilitate inside as a 10. He's really good on the ball. He can play as part of that like tight knit triangle. Very, very good. And if you have someone like Dalot on that right side with him, who can offer both these runs, but also these runs, because Dalot, we've seen, he's used to inverting. You have both from him. It allows Ahmad to come out into this area. Not a key figure of Amorim at Sporting, but something to consider, that having those sort of fullbacks that can support these players here with their runs in behind, which leads us on to the midfield pivot. Take Ahmad out. I do think that with the midfield pivot, this is very much like your Hjulmand and your sort of Morita or Bracagna. Don't know how you pronounce his name, who's playing this season in there. Daniel Bracagna with Hjulmand. But Morita last year, when I did a lot of my work on Sporting, very much like Mainu in the sense that he can get back and forward. He's box to box. He can attack the box. He can sort of affect the game on the edge of the box and box crash. But he can also be part of that build-up play, very narrow, helping get the ball into these areas of the pitch, but also being narrow enough that the ball can bypass them to then come back, and then Mainu is the one that's driving the team forward from those areas. So very much like Morita in that sense. And then Agate, we've seen Agate already under Amorim, and Hjulmand was actually Agate's replacement, and Hjulmand is brilliant, and I think that's exactly the role Agate will play again in here with this too. So I think, as much as I wasn't the biggest fan of the Agate move for Manchester United when they were playing in a a 4-man defence with a 2 in front, I do think that in this sort of system change, this pivot can work really well, and it can really replicate that Hjulmand-Morita partnership in the middle of the pitch, right? So I think that's good news for both Mainu and Agate. In terms of what's behind them, when Euro's fit, I think this is the back three. I think it picks itself. And I also think Onana is going to be really good in this team. I think you're going to start to get sort of again, Amorim will go vertical at times. So having that ability of Onana to go both ways to high and wide wing backs when they make those runs, very important. Because again, this is often what the team will look like if we sort of spread it out, spread the defence a little bit like this. Very narrow pivot. And trying to create those little passing lanes into there. So that's annoying me. I'm going to have to get rid of that. Bang. So I think Onana's passing range will be better utilised, much more like when he was at Inter. I think De Ligt, a bit of experience on the ball in the central centre-back and a little bit more protection for him. I think Martinez in this role is just going to be perfect in terms of he can maraud a little bit. He can get into really good areas to use that passing range, but also his passing angles on that left foot. I think he'll be brilliant at finding these sort of like progressive passes, especially into someone like Rashford. And especially if it is Rashford, to even make these sort of long balls over the top into these channels, something that even Højlund can make those runs too. So I think that's really good news for Martinez, and I think you'll get the best out of him, especially when you consider their out of possession sort of qualities, right, that we said that they're going to do. These players have the license, especially when in the pressing structure, which we'll really quickly Oh, really quickly, try and put it into the pressing structure, which looks something like this, usually. Right? The space here is something that a lot of people at United might be like, oh no, this is exactly what the problem was under Ten Hag. The difference is both of these players have the license to press up here because there is now five in the back line. Until the fullbacks have pushed on, if a trap has been set, there's five in the back line, five in the front line. This space can be occupied by one of the centre backs, whichever one at the aggressor. So last season, this season it's been Diomande for Sporting. It could even be it could be one of the wider centre backs. Diomande has been playing as the central centre back, and that is something that Amorim prefers. At least he did last season when I did a lot of studying on that team for the central centre back to step up. But again, with how Manchester United sort of have their players, I wouldn't be surprised if it's either one of these players that step up to protect this space, and then there's a bit of a shuffle to create that four in that moment of when it happens and when the centre back jumps up into that space to protect it. So I think that's going to help again with not only the profiles of the defenders that you've got, but also protecting the space in behind these two and allowing them to play at their best qualities. On the right side, I've sort of linked a few people that I think could be used more often under Amorim, and we could sort of see different roles or something a bit different with them. We spoke about Ahmad playing in that sort of attacking midfield role on the right side. If Fernandes was on the left, for example, Lindelof, until Euro is back, I could definitely see Lindelof playing in that spot. Again, a bit more aggression, a bit more sort of front and back foot defending. Can jump into those areas, and I think he just suits Amorim more than say Maguire playing as a wide centre back. I think if you're going to see Maguire, it'll be in the central centre back role. Who else we've got Xerxes, which we spoke about. I think he just offers you something a little bit different if you've already got the direct threats running in from someone like Rashford. Mount's an interesting one because much like Fernandes in this role, he could be, if he gets back to full fitness, he's someone that could be utilised in that way. Tuchel used him in that way at Chelsea, so that's an interesting one to sort of like highlight. Anthony is a really interesting one because I think he, as well as Garnacho, I think they're sort of areas that they could win a spot in this team are actually on the wing back positions. And I think having those sort of 1v1 threats out wide, but also the tenacity enough to track back and do their job coming backwards. I think these two could be players to watch out for that could undergo little sort of minor tweaks in their game in order to get into the team, which you could see as a bad thing for them, but you could also see this as a positive because it could mean that they are sort of revitalized in a new role. And then I've highlighted Amas and Collier. Collier more so just as a sort of backup option. Amas more so again because I think speaking, we're going to end it on this stretch and pinpoint that we made earlier for the United fullbacks. I think Amas adds that a little bit more than someone like Mazraoui until you can get a new signing in. And I'll flash up on screen now a few of the new signing links that we've seen already or like we've seen in the past. This could definitely be the time for Manchester United to go out and sort of acquire, as hard as it may be, a Alphonso Davies or a Jeremy Frimpong. Or one shout that I made yesterday on Twitter, more of a youngster sort of for this would be Patrick Dorgu on this side of the pitch. But having a player that can really pin teams back with athleticism, ability to run in behind, it would then even mean that you don't need Rashford in there. So you could then opt, if Rashford still isn't in his best form, you could opt for both Mount and Fernandes. You could opt for Ahmad, who I think would be so good in this role. So I'd really love to see that. And this be, if these fullbacks are right, I think this could be a really fun triangle to have in the middle of the pitch for Manchester United. So it just gives you lots of different options. And I think that is the one area of this team that I think would have to be targeted quite quickly. As much as I rate Dallo and Mazraoui, I just don't think they're the exact right types. I think they'll work for now, and I think that's how they'll start because they're both good footballers. But I think if you're trying to get the absolute maximum out of this system, you need a little bit more in these areas from those fullbacks or those wing backs, which again is where you might see Garnacho and Anthony make a little claim for themselves in one of those positions for the likes of January or even next summer when United are able to do a little bit of business in that area of the pitch. So it'll be very interesting to see how Manchester United approach the transfer market and how Amorim sets up his first Manchester United team, and if it's anything like what we've just spoke about on screen. Let me know your thoughts on the Amorim appointment for Manchester United. Some players you think will succeed, some players you think may fail, some tactical tweaks you think Amorim may make, and how you think it will go for Amorim at Manchester United. Let me know if you want to see some more Amorim-style videos for Manchester United, some winners and losers in terms of player profiles, things like that. And make sure you're back here tomorrow for the Manchester United Ruud van Nistelrooy breakdown, ready for their game against Chelsea at the weekend.